Slinging seeds, sliding on into home, throwing heat, buddy, we're going, gone. If you gotta go down, you gotta go down, swinging, slinging seeds. It's America's favorite pastime. Come on, let's have a good time, slinging seeds. Yeah, we're just slinging seeds.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Slinging Seeds. I am your host, Kyle Evans, and across the table from me is my co-host, Doug Adams. And our returning guest today is from episode 1, Juan Espinosa. Juan, how's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me back, boys.
Absolutely. It's always a good time to hang around Poppy and have a good conversation. Doug, how you doing this morning?
Good. So, I mean, where I want to start is obviously high school baseball is going on right now. The youth teams are starting to play, and you train the guys for the whole off season, a lot of them, right? So, what is it like watching those guys in game right now, seeing the statistics come through? I know some of them still reach out to you consistently and follow up with you. What is that feeling like for you?
As far as how they're doing this season,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I've been hearing a lot of guys are doing really well this year. I hope to have some kind of like nice little graphic for some of the guys that are doing really well this year and get some numbers out for some of those guys. I know we got a few guys already getting over that 40 inning mark, starters, seniors, older guys. But no, it's awesome to see all the hard work that they've been putting in, whether it's, this offseason, the past few years, because a lot of these guys that are having good years, they're going on year 3 of high school ball, year 2 or 3. So some of those guys are having to step up into bigger roles than what they're used to. And I was laughing. I think about Jake. He's a young guy, sophomore, Reinhardt. And, he didn't have as many like of the harder games his freshman year. And he pitched really well. And
He pitched against us last year. That was a pretty big game for him.
I think that was one of his biggest games last year for sure. 100%. And I think going into his sophomore year, he was asked to have a bigger role, pitching against bigger teams. So I've been really interested in guys like that maybe had that midweek start against a non-conference team and seeing them now being conference starters and seeing how they are growing. So that's been really cool to see. But no, the development with how pitchers are doing, and we also have a lot of two-way guys that are relief guys. I think about Sauber getting some innings this year and doing well in relief. So yeah, it's been really nice to see how guys are improving year in, year out. Yeah, it's been sweet.
I think the coolest thing about that too is, I watched Colton Mullenkamp go last year. I mean, he probably had a total of 7 innings all year, maybe, yeah. And now he's thrown 50 this year, and he just closed out GWalk this past Friday night. Yeah. Taking it for Springboro with an 11-1 win over Centerville.
Basically a whole new team over there.
Oh yeah, huge.
Wow.
So for to see a guy kind of switch gears like that, yeah, and change roles, it's something that he and I talked about in the player spotlight. Yeah. It's just really good to see like the fruitions of his labors. Mm-hmm. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So, I mean, one of the things I want to touch on here is obviously right now there's a bunch of guys in season. I mean, you still have some groups where guys come in for their instruction. During season, when they are throwing 40, 50 innings, what's your focus with those athletes and how do you keep them going and also keep them fresh while they can't really come in here and throw a bunch of baseballs?
Yeah, there's 2 different answers to that, right? You have your POs. Those are easy. You can plan out their week. They usually have a pretty good idea of when they're pitching next. The harder guys to try to, recommend when to throw, when not to throw are the two-way guys, right? Yeah. Because that's like, okay, well, for the two-way guys, it's like, okay, if we can find 2 days off where there's absolutely no throwing during the week, then that's like huge. You know what I mean? And that's hard to do when you're a two-way guy, especially when all the rainouts happen. Oh. Now the season's getting ramped up and you're like, okay, I got to get my games in. So, definitely there's 2 different ways to think about it. As the pitcher only guy, really easy to recommend. Some guys like to throw the day after they pitch, depending on how many pitches that they have. Some guys don't. I always, if you throw like, more than 70 pitches, if you want to take one day off, great, right? But if you're throwing on 5-day rest or 4-day rest, you need to make sure you're throwing that second day. And then at least for me personally, like when I was a pitcher only, and especially in college, that midweek pen that, sounds great and all, like early in the season, sure I could do it. But when it got to the end, I was like, no shot. That bullpen turned into a short box
Yeah.
and just touch and feel because, by the end of the year, you're starting to feel, and that's as a pitcher only. When it comes to the two-way guy, I think for the two-way guys, it has to be a lot more routine based. So those guys are not going to have, they're only going to have bullpens based on if they haven't thrown in a while, just to keep their pitch count up. But as a two-way guy, I think for them it has to be routine, meaning like they're working on, every day they play catch because they have to because they're playing the field. So when they're done playing catch, they got to go into some spins and grips, short box works. That way they can stay on top of their pitches because most of those two-way guys are going to be relievers, and if they're not on their stuff and they haven't felt the mound in a couple of weeks, that's when bad outings start coming up. So those two-way guys, they have to be having a routine in terms of like they're working on pitching almost daily or every other day, but it's super light intent, right? And then keeping up with their pitch count, but then also managing fatigue and making sure they're resting at least 2 days a week, especially as a two-way guy.
What were some things that, like routine wise, that you would exhibit? And now, is this something that you learned later in your career as like the instructor side, or is this something that you kind of developed in college?
So routine, I think I had this in my one of the notes that I really wanted to talk about, and it kind of goes into mental game stuff as well. Routine, when I was growing up, when it was taught to me, it wasn't really so much about like playing better or like physically, right? It was more so like, hey, the same routine that you've had for the past 5-6 months, you know, whether it's here or there, indoor facility, or at your home ballpark. That routine was just so you can feel grounded, so you could feel like, okay, I've done this a million times, whether you're pitching at a college stadium or you guys were at the Red Stadium, right?
Yeah.
How the heck mentally are you supposed to like lock in for that game and not be like, you know what I mean?
Impossible.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
It's,
right?
yeah.
So I think when it comes to, routines, I think about, okay, like, what's your pregame routine? How do you warm up? Whether that's a team or as an individual, if you're starting, like trying to make sure it is as close to home as possible. And that routine needs to be, you know, I think very, you started at the same time, whether it's 40 minutes before, and then that helps you get locked in, right? That's the mental side of it. And I think the physical side of it is is building your routine, right?
Yeah.
So building your routine around the things that, that you need to struggle with. Like maybe you have really bad hamstring mobility and you need to stay on top of that. Or maybe your back gets tight after, a couple weeks of pitching or whatever. So like that routine needs to be based around those deficiencies. And then, in Ohio, it's cold. So when it's early in the season, you got to find some kind of routine that gets your heart rate up, that gets you sweating more than, maybe right now. Yesterday, showed up to the Wright State game. They're playing on turf. Felt like it was 90 degrees over there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like you probably don't need as big of a routine. So being able to have that adjustability, but still being able to like have like the mental side, the physical side all in one. I think building a routine is something that, a lot of guys, maybe don't think it's that serious, but kind of like how you asked me is more so like something you learn as you get older. You're like, wow, this is like actually a really big deal,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember talking to some college athletes, like a buddy of mine, Robert Landers, played at Ohio State.
Okay.
He would talk about always about how his morning routine went, and
Yeah.
if he ever decided to travel down a different avenue for that day,
Yeah.
his entire day would be thrown off.
100%.
I mean, and that's an Ohio State football player. Like that guy's played on the D line. You know,
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like, that guy needs to be prepared for every
Yeah.
single appearance, a game or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I think it translates with all athletes. I think.
What's
it's
one of
not
the
just
like funny things that you guys would do like as like a mental set when you guys played? Like kind of
Well,
like that routine.
I fished the day before I pitched
Oh yeah.
you
Why
would
is that?
fish the day
because
before.
I'm so psychotic. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so amped, and if not, I'm gonna puke and think I would go fish, and I'd play the start in my head.
That's cool.
See, so like when I was in high school, I would eat tropical smoothie the morning of every day, and it would be like that banana peanut butter thing. And then so when I started playing, and I had my fall appearances in college, I was like, there's not a tropical smoothie within 100
Oh
miles of
boy,
this place.
that's gonna be a rough day.
So like when I'm trying to get back in my own routine, I tried making that stuff on my own. Like that was one thing, but I mean really, I think this is gonna sound crazy because it's so simple, but I always had like a certain way I did bands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
you
I
got
feel
to.
like that would be lock in. That would be like a lock in for me too. I
Yeah.
mean, I know guys that would wear the same freaking socks. So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? There's all
Yeah.
kinds of different, you know, uh,
I still do that
routine.
stuff. I mean, to this day, like I have a pair of pants that got burned on the heater a couple of years ago in
Yeah.
the dugout because we have a dugout kerosene heater,
Okay.
and my pants got burnt, and we won that. It was a big game against somebody I don't remember who it was against. Maybe it was Troy Christian. So every time we have a big game, you'll see me show up with pants that are burnt on the one side.
It's just,
You can't rip those out of you. No way.
people think superstitions are crazy, but I
Definitely
think
baseball players.
that's
We got those in the bag. Yeah, I think about on my start days when I was playing for Sonoma. It's different than in high school, right? You got to go to school. So like when you're playing professionally, that's like the game. That's all you got, right? You show up to the field at like 4 p.m. Games at 7 or 6. So like I would sleep in as long as I could. If I woke up at 9 a.m., I was mad because then I would have like 5, 6 hours to think about the start day. So
Yeah.
I'm going to sleep late and I'm gonna sleep in as long as I can. Hopefully, I wake up at 1 p.m. just so I can not think about the
Right.
game that's about to be later tonight. Because yeah, I mean, for sure, trying to like mentally like not check in too early. That's something like a lot of the vets talked about when you were like in the bullpen is making sure you time up when you mentally check into a game. 7 inning game, going into a 9 inning game, like that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So like when you're a reliever and you're at the ball field, games at 6 or 7 p.m. and you have to be at the field at 1 p.m. for that early work, then you come back for batting practice at 4. That's a long day because you're not pitching until 10 p.m. maybe. So it's like, don't be locked in or in the game mentally super early because if you get checked in too early, it's gonna be a long game for you.
Yeah, that anticipation can definitely kill.
100%. So it's always funny how everybody uses their own like superstitions to learn how to cope. That's all it is. It's a coping mechanism to help you, try to. That's all. I think that's what we're talking about here is how do you mentally get in the right state of mind to perform at your best. That's all it is. If you can figure out what works best for you, because everybody's different. That's the key. Everybody's different. Figuring out, and that's why it takes so long, right?
Yeah.
Takes
That's
so.
what, yeah.
How do you get a youth athlete to have a routine? It's got to be obviously dumbed down. What do you do with the younger guys to help them like have some semblance of like a routine?
Yeah, you're
I mean, for us, like we hit heavy balls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because at the youth level, everywhere you go doesn't have a cage, right? So you can't always just get in the cage and hit.
So
Like
true.
hitting routine. So you got to do something that can be consistent. So we have heavy balls, so we hit heavy balls before our game.
And you can do that anywhere.
And you can do that anywhere. You don't need much room, right?
Yeah.
So we hit the farm system heavy balls, and then they can get in their dynamics and then try to throw. Because the other thing that if you're not mentally prepared at the youth level, like that's how you get hurt. Because when that previous game ends, I mean, they're gonna go, hey, you got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been doing anything, then your pitcher's not going to be ready. He's going to have soreness. He's going to tweak something. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the hardest thing to teach 13-year-olds, right? Well, the game's still going on. Why are you on me right now? And you see them hitting heavy balls left-handed instead of right-handed, or playing Clash of Clans on their phones with each other or whatever.
Sure.
It's like, hey, we got to be ready. You know what I mean? So you try to create that routine, but at 13, they're not going to get it.
Yeah. That's what you got as a coach. You got to be on top of it, and then one day when they're older, they'll understand for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a process.
So one of the things I want to ask about is in season, right? I think we're at the point of the year where you're starting to see some velos go down a little bit.
Yeah.
And obviously, so what goes into that? Why is the guy in January and February that's hitting 85 now throwing 82?
Yeah.
What can athletes do to avoid that from happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is simple. Audience, you guys can go online and search how long it takes your body to detrain, basically. And it really doesn't take that long. Studies have, a few years back have said it takes 2 weeks, of no lifting to detrain, meaning like you're starting to lose some gains, stuff like that. That makes me think about like old man strength. Like I'm older now and, I don't detrain as much, because a lot of like the, those building years when you're younger. So like, I still have, you can maintain a really good base when you're older, but when you're younger and you're still developing, like it really fluctuates really badly. I think that one of the best way to, at least for parents to understand is like, let's say you're a runner. I think we've all, ran at some point one way or another. But like if you were asked to run 1 mile, how would you feel the next day? I think everybody would know or have an idea how you're going to feel the next day. So don't think about that. Think about, okay, when was the last time I ran? You know what I mean? So you think about if you're like, training to run, whether it's jogging a mile or whatever, 2 miles, if you took a whole 2 weeks off of running, how would you feel after that? And then that kind of helps, parents and kids better understand, because the arm's the same way, the body's the same way, the when you lift is the same way. So you have to try to maintain some kind of a stress on your body to keep the adaptation that you've been working on. So if you have, you know, if you have a guy that hasn't, lifted in a week, some guys might get sore from that lift. But you have to understand, okay, well, why are we doing this lift? Why are we doing this training, right? Well, it's to maintain so and so and so and so. But I think that's the other thing is, when it comes to in-season lifting and training, kids want to perform. Kids want to play better. So they don't want, being sore is going to be another excuse of why they didn't play well or why they didn't pitch well, or why they get hurt, whatever. So when it comes to, weightlifting in season, I call that the trap. It happens at every single level. Even like, a young guy on a college team waiting for his, first appearance. He wants to make sure he is ready for his first appearance. So like, I'll give you an example. So if you're, first year guy on a team, right? You don't know when you're pitching, especially if you're a reliever, right? So let's say, weekend tournament comes in, you're like, oh, I can't wait for my start. I'm not going to lift on Thursday, maybe Wednesday. My last lift was on Tuesday. So we're going, I think I'm going to pitch on Friday. So I want to be ready for Friday. Didn't pitch on Friday. Can't lift today because I might pitch tomorrow. That's the trap. Now on Saturday, you're like, oh, can't lift today because I got to be ready for Sunday, tournament. So then it's like, and then it goes on and on and on. And then you look back and you're 5 days out and you're like, you hit one good lift and you get sore and coach says, hey, you're throwing a bullpen on Tuesday now. After you lifted on Monday, your bullpen on Tuesday sucked because you were sore, and your coach's like, I can't pitch you like this, or I can't play you like this. You're not having a good practice. So then the kid, the athlete's like, man, he resonates why he did bad with his soreness. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I call that the trap. Don't fall into the trap. How do you not fall into the trap? You maintain. Do a little bit of everything as much as you can. I'd rather you break your workouts in half and work at a lighter intent than not doing anything at all.
100%.
That's the key. So I think when it comes to in-season training, and if you want to maintain your velocity or maintain how you're doing, that's why you got to, obviously there's the pregame routine, which we talked about, but having a post-throwing day routine, having a midway throwing routine. But like, I think one way to help ease, parents and athletes, it's like, think about, weightlifting just like throwing a baseball. We're athletes, right? We're training athletes here. So if you are expected to throw every day, baseball needs to start becoming a sport, and it should have been a long time ago. I think we're trying to. Or baseball's like football, like, lifting is a prerequisite to the sport. Like you have to be training to continue to improve, but most importantly during season to stay healthy. Have to. It needs to be part of baseball, and that's the biggest thing. If you want to maintain those gains and you want to stay healthy during season, lifting has to be part
There's
of
a lot of
everything.
college athletes that I have relationships with that they don't care. They lift on game day. You know what I mean? Like they're going to get their lifts in.
Yeah.
Even some pitchers, which I
Mhm.
find insane. But you know what I mean? That's their routine. They lift the morning of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean there are things called activation lifts. So
Yeah.
like, you don't have to destroy your muscle. You can lift pre-game and it actually, boost up your CNS system, helps you a little bit more quick twitch. So that stuff is more than enough to, help you. I remember like Jake at Reinhardt again, he pitches a lot on Mondays. So like our Sunday in-season program, like most of his Sundays, I'm like telling him, hey, you got to come in on Tuesday or Wednesday after your game on Monday so we can get a heavy lift, because the day before the game I can't load him up. You know what I mean? So the day before the game I'm like, okay, we're gonna get you going. We're gonna get you ramped up. I can't overload his volume. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of that plays a big part into it for sure.
No, and another big thing is like with lifting, I think some guys, and like you were talking about some of the guys who are like psychotic, who just they don't care, they'll
No,
just do it
they're lifting.
anyway. I think it's because that you have to find the value.
Yeah.
Like you have to understand, like when you don't fall into the trap
Yeah.
and you do see the results and see the maintained ability, that's the guys that have that is because they see the value. I mean,
Yeah.
and a lot of kids just don't see it. They just see exhaustion. That's all they see.
For sure. And I think, I think about like my own personal experience, like, I didn't have like mentors like you guys growing up, but like a lot of our guys, they have a lot of us, and we all have really good information and understanding of the weight room. So I think, like for me, I remember I worked out one day during my high school season. My tricep got sore because I hadn't lifted. We were on an away trip and the boys were lifting, so I wanted to work out too. I wasn't a big workout person in high school. So I got sore and I was asked to pitch 2 days after that, and I was still sore, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to pitch. I didn't want to because my tricep was, dude. I think it was the first time I ever had a pump in my tricep,
Well,
and it was tight and all that stuff, so I didn't want to pitch. So for the longest time, I had resonated, like the weight room with like, well, I can't be sore for pitching. Again, understand like back then when I graduated high school in 2010. Pitchers weren't allowed to lift upper body back then. All we did was run pulls, and that was our conditioning. That was our, training.
long
So
course.
a lot difference, back then in training than what it is now. But that's why I say like the mentor stuff and having people that you know, or even teammates that are now in college, reach out to those guys especially if you don't have somebody to help you because, figuring out the weightlifting during season, I think that's definitely what separates a lot of college guys from high school guys, without a doubt.
Yeah, and another thing, like I think this might be off topic a little bit, but I think a lot of guys, and you can probably hit on this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, your junior, senior year in high school are are probably really important, especially as a pitcher,
Mhm.
because you do have to find the identity of what makes you good, your routine, your what, your lifts.
Yeah.
Because when you get to college, a lot of kids think, oh, well, they're just going to handle it for me. They're going to take care of it. Like they have a program or they have this or some colleges don't.
Very small percentage of
Yeah.
colleges do that.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of have to have that, that growth, and you have to grow up before you get there and have that plan because once you get there, and
Yeah.
if you think that everything's going to be taken care of,
And I try to resonate it with different things. Like you guys are hitting coaches, so like, how important is practicing hitting in season?
They got hit every day.
But coach, I just had 20 at bats this week. Why do I have to hit more?
Yeah,
So that's probably what I'm PO guy.
right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm assuming that's what they're thinking. I just played 3 games. Why do I have to practice hitting more? Can you guys touch on that too?
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple for me. I mean, hitters hit,
Yeah.
right? Every good hitter I've ever been around hits more than the other guy. Like, it's very simple because hitting's hard, right? So you have to work, right? You have to work every day. You have to understand your craft. You have to understand, okay, when I'm late, this is my adjustment. When I'm early, this is my adjustment, right? I'm getting jammed. Okay, this is my adjustment. Oh, I'm getting it off the end, right? Oh, this is my adjustment, right? You have to know. And I always tell my guys there's 6 things you can do, and stole that from Pete Rose, right? There's 6 things you can do in that because once we get to season, I ain't changing your swing. With the exception unless you really, really need it changed, right?
Yeah, things are going well, right?
There's exceptions, Cam Wheeler, perfect example, right? Cam Wheeler yesterday came in for the last 2 weeks. He didn't like where his swing was. He had an old hitting coach, and as the velos went up, he started to get a little long, and not having the same success. We made some adjustments, and he hit one yesterday about 350 feet
Yeah.
in game for a bomb. You know what I mean? And so it's like. But that's an extreme. Most guys, I don't want you to mess with your swing. Don't think about it, right?
Yeah.
At this point, you all got what you got, right? You're going to battle with it. You got if it's a knife, it's a pistol, if it's a fly swatter, you got what you got. So
Yeah.
now we got to find a way to be successful with what you have.
Yeah.
So I've always told them very simply, and like I said, something I stole from Pete Rose. There's 6 things you can do as a hitter to change it, right? If I'm getting jammed, I move off the plate. If I'm getting it off the end, I move on the plate, right? If I'm early, I move up in the box. If I'm late, I move back in the box, right? If that doesn't fix it enough, you can choke up, you can choke down, right? There's lots of things you can do with how you hold the bat that's going to give you more bat control.
While
right?
maintaining the same mechanics.
Right? Again, don't change your mechanics, right? Don't change your mechanics. Take the same swing,
Make an adjustment.
Yep.
Right. That's one of the options.
The adjustment isn't, hey, I'm going to do this with my hands. No, that's a mistake in season, right? I'm
Yeah.
going to do this. And then, I always tell the kids, hey, this is a Band-Aid. We'll get to it later, but this is a Band-Aid so you can be successful now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and it's working. It'll work for guys. You know what I mean? Because everybody's got an issue.
Yeah.
How do we help them be successful with the issue they currently have?
So, as hitting coaches, what would be like a good routine on a non-game day for a hitter? How long should
Even
they?
on game day. So
Yeah.
I'm talking, I tell my guys, Now this all started with Kent Reeser, was the first psychotic guy I ever coached, and I think he hit 509 his senior year of high school.
Nice. Bird.
Yeah, and hit 570 with us in the summer that year at 18U, and then was a 4-year starter in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Kent used to have a calendar up in his room, and he could set, like, I used to mess with him. Hey, August 12th, and he'd go to August 12th, and he could tell you exactly how many swings he took.
Yeah.
And for him, it was, I'm going to swing until I feel good. And for him, feeling good meant he barreled, I forget the number, 10, 15, 20 balls in a row.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Off the tee, where it felt like.
Talk about consistency.
Right.
Well, I
felt
mean,
right.
yeah, I mean, with consistency, I think the most important thing that I talk to about with hitters is muscle memory. I mean, hitting is muscle memory, and the only way that you create muscle memory is reps. You have to be able to feel good.
Yeah, because you're reacting when it comes to hitting, right?
Yes, 100%.
And the biggest problem my guys run into now is, right, and what a lot of people are missing, and I disagree with a lot of people on this, so I get that, is the lack of velo training.
Yeah.
Right. It's cool to hit off a tee, and I am a huge tee advocate, right?
Yeah.
I think you should hit 50, 100 swings off a tee every day. But if you're not doing velo training 2 days a week, off of a machine, velo you're not comfortable at,
2 days a week at minimum.
Yeah, right. If you're not doing velo training 2 days a week, where it's a machine where it's a little higher than your comfort zone, where you have to adjust, because then what happens, they'll start rushing, and then they feel that they can't. Then they learn they can't rush. You know what I mean? It's a good learning point. But you have to get ready for a real heater, right? I mean,
yeah, I think 100%, because, like, I hit until my post second year of college, so I hit through that. But one of the reasons I didn't enjoy hitting, now that I think about it, back then, it was because if the ball got over 82 miles per hour, I want no business in the box, none. And, I think obviously the mechanical side plays a role with it, but you said feel comfortable. I never felt comfortable in the box over 82 miles per hour. So, like, 100%, like, I think if you're not seeing velocity, and training for it, then how are you expected to, hit it those 3 swings that you saw on the weekend? You know what I mean?
There's a lot of guys that go, well, I want to see it off the arm. Well, I mean,
sure.
I mean, that's cute.
Everybody does.
You know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
I mean, when I have the ability to throw 96, you know what I mean, from my arm, then cool, you'll get off the arm. But, like,
100%.
for me, I mean, I'll do some front toss stuff. Working on different drills, but every lesson I do, there's a machine involved.
Yeah.
Every lesson I do.
Yeah.
Because you have to see that. You know what I mean? And it's the only way to train is to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree a lot, and a lot of that's like I feel like that's just an excuse too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I got to see it out of the arm. I time up an arm way
Well,
better
it
than
is,
I
especially if you're not comfortable with that velo. I'd be coming up with all kinds of excuses. I'll tell you right now, I'm not stepping in there.
Well,
you better throw
I
batting
think
practice to me.
the biggest thing too is that I try to when I use machine, because some kids hate it.
Yeah.
It's the truth, and it's fine.
I've never seen a good hitter that hates it.
Well, the moment you go into college baseball and they put the machine, that's where you weed yourself out.
Yeah.
You know
Well,
what I mean?
another thing though, like, as an instructor though, you don't always get a hitter in the cage that's a good hitter. You know what I mean? So, like, from the instruction side, I try to do the best I can to help a kid relate the machine to the arm. Like, I do this, I drop down to here, the ball comes out, it makes a sound. That should be your foot strike. Like, things like that.
But also too, I think, like, when I remember hitting against the machine, besides the point that I was absolutely terrified, was I didn't have, like, a coach telling me, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm swinging and missing 15 in a row, and I'm getting, like, absolutely all domed up. And, instead of a coach telling me, like, hey, this is not so much, you're not going to hit 600 off of this. It's more so, get your visual reps, start getting comfortable with the velocity, right? And seeing how you can manage that. Because that's where it was for me. It was like, I saw 90 coming at me, and I'm like, no, thank you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I've seen it both ways. I've seen guys say that they need to see it out of an arm, and then I've seen guys absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny to me, guys. Well, I can't hit off the machine. Well, then you can't hit.
Yeah.
Like, that's honestly how I feel, and I say that to guys. I'm a prick sometimes, but it's like, oh, I can't hit off the machine. Cool, you can't hit. Like, that's okay, but don't say it's because of a machine.
Yeah, see-ball, hit ball.
Because that means you're not going to hit 92 out of an arm either.
No.
I remember when I was going to see my pitching coach in Miami, when I still lived down there in the summers. So, where I trained, like, Manny Machado would go there, A-Rod, John Jay, a lot of the Florida Miami boys. It was like the first time I'd seen it, and I was in college, but they hit off a machine throwing nasty breakers. That's all they hit. Curveball breakers, going opposite way with it. They did that for like 90 minutes. You know what I mean? And, I always think about that. You try to relate that. At the time, I wasn't hitting anymore, but I'm like, if I was a hitter, I was like, I never even had a chance. Like those guys they already made it. They're already making millions of dollars, and they just put in 90 minutes of machine work on a curveball, and they're just hitting it
Yeah.
like nothing. You know what I mean? So when you see that, you're like, dude, if I was a hitter, I'd be doing that all day.
Yeah.
Because the big league guys are doing it like that's their job. Like
Right.
that's your job. You're supposed to hit that, So when I see that machine, if you're not comfortable with the machine, yeah, I get it. It's hard, right?
That's the whole point, right? It's got to be harder than facing you.
Good point.
Gotta be comfortable in the zone too.
I think comfort is huge. That was one of the biggest things that I struggled with. So if you're a hitter, hit it against the machine, buddy.
So obviously we're talking about training here, so I want to get into the summer stuff. You have a lot of cool things that you do in the summertime
Yeah.
with Top V. So let's talk a little bit about your summer plan and what that's going to look like.
Yeah, so we got pretty much one more month before we go into our summer program. We're in May right now, right?
Yeah.
So basically, right now we got offerings right now between Mondays and Thursdays. We got our pitching slots, your training slots, which athletes can use for bullpens. They can use for a meeting, mental training, whatever it is that they need to work on for those that one-on-one time. And then we still have open groups available each day, Monday through Thursday. Sundays we're gonna keep the in-season program going probably until third week maybe, probably before the last week of May. And then we go into our summer program, and then but I think the summer development starts that last week of May, the 27th.
Yeah,
yes.
Tuesday. Yep.
Yes. So yeah, we switched up the times a little bit this year. Starts at 10 a.m. So 10 a.m. to 1. Yep. So come on in here. I'll be here. A lot of the college training guys will be here as well. And we always try to find a couple college coaches in the area. The guys that are training in the summer. In the past we've had Dreyer and Zink. Zink will be in Alaska this year, so we'll miss him. But we'll always try to find a couple college coaches to help out with the younger guys. They resonate with those guys really well.
Obi.
Yeah, Mr. Obi.
Coach Obi.
Get him and Allman back in here. But
Miss those guys.
yeah, they'll be back soon. But
hopefully not too soon.
Right.
Right, because they're
Coach I see.
having a great year.
I'm rooting for you, Kyle.
Well, yeah, we're all rooting for them.
Yeah, but no, but going into the summer program, that'll be here. Tuesdays will be Top V Day. The first day is usually an eval day, unless you're a returning athlete. I don't make returning athletes do evals in the summer just because we've already done 2. So if you're a new athlete, you'll definitely eval that day. We'll test, your vertical broad jumps on that first day, see where we're at. That way we can see how we've improved in the summer. And honestly, I mean, if your team doesn't practice much during the week, I couldn't think of a better thing to do this summer than doing the summer development program. It's in the middle of the day, early in the morning. If you have games or practices in the afternoon, it's a perfect way to get your son or daughter to start getting comfortable training, in season, right? Because the summers are, spring or, baseball and softball season. What a better way to get used to, working on speed and agility, hitting, pitching. We don't do much pitching that time of the year. It's more so, in-season training. So it's more med ball work. It's more, arm care work. But working with Sam, working fielding. So like, it's probably the best way to, feel what a college program would look like, honestly. Because if you're playing, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then you're gonna get your training in on, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, if you have team practice on the afternoons, then at night, I mean, what a better way to see if your athlete is actually about it. You know what I mean? Because like when they come in here, all of us, we love our jobs, we love what we do. We don't like to waste our time. So these kids, we're gonna push these kids that come, and we're gonna make the most out of our time with them. So I think I speak for everybody. We don't give slack to the guys that come in to train.
No, and I think what we've done now. I'm not gonna say that we've put more focus on summer development this year, but I think that we have. Every year we've just tried to improve.
Well, it's definitely improved this year with the crew we have with X here, you, me, Frankie. I'm not 100% sure on Tyler Vinters. His schedule's kind of booked right now between Oakwood and summer ball, so I don't know if he'll be here. But Sam Faulkner, Dawson Blaylock, you guys at Top V, like
Russo,
yeah, Frankie's going to do his thing, right, leading it. You know what I mean?
And we can't forget softball instructions always
With
is led by Haley Ferguson. And
Yeah.
I'm really excited to
fresh
see how
off
that
the Big
works.
Ten championship at Michigan,
Yeah,
right?
huge.
So she's
That's
going to
pretty
come in here at the softball level. Having Haley here to run our softball summer development program is absolutely incredible. I think it's an incredible opportunity for all the girls and all those things. So I think Haley being here is massive for the summer development program. If you're a softball player, you should probably come in all summer and get to work with Haley. I mean,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And then, I mean, a lot of that comes with it. You're not coming here for one thing. You're going to get exposed to a little bit all facets of the game. That's the beauty of it. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about summer development program: catching, hitting, fielding, pitching.
You get it all.
Speed and performance. It's all included. I think it's a really good, reasonable rate for 8 weeks of training. It's a lot of fun.
I think the last graphic, it was like 72 hours of coaching.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's insane.
Yeah, and I think another thing is like the feedback that we get from it. We've had youth players that play on the weekends, obviously, and they get that weekday training with us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they're just like, man, I don't know what it did, what you did, but his swing looks a lot better, or there's just things making youth kids that are making leaps on the field.
Well, basically what we just talked about in-season training, we're doing it for you. You
Yeah.
don't even have to plan it out. You just show up.
Exactly.
Just show up and we'll take care of you. That's basically what we do with the summer development program. It's been pretty sweet. And then we take, pretty much kids from all the way from, 6 years old. So we can work with those guys and we can also work with high school athletes.
Yeah, one of the things I really want to say to the high school athletes so they can know, and the 8-year-old athlete, right? We're not going to put an 8-year-old with a 17-year-old.
Right.
No, it's not
Right.
going to happen.
We split them by groups. So you're going to work with the high school kids, and then you're going to work with the middle age, and
Yep.
you're going to work with the young guys, and they'll rotate in groups. So that way they're with their own age group. You don't have to worry about a 17-year-old throwing at your 9-year-old. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%.
And as a high school kid, I mean, I know as a lot of high school kids, they don't want to train with a 9-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, they'll be there and they'll be cool with them, but they don't want to train with a 9-year-old. They want to work on with guys their own age. So
Yeah.
that'll be the case too.
Yeah, also this summer we also have like college program. We have a lot of hitting coaches here. If guys that are coming home for the summer that want to work with our hitting coaches, our fielding coaches, come check us out. I'll be having the pitching program here for the Top Velocity summer program. I usually get in touch with all the college guys that are wanting to train, figure out the best time to work with you guys, but I'm pretty flexible. Try to get you guys, early afternoon is usually what most guys. Some guys are working in the mornings. So, and a lot of guys like to sleep in. They're tired of all those 6 a.m. lifts in college, probably. I feel that. But no, we've worked with rehab guys coming back from injury. We've worked with guys playing college summer ball. A lot of guys come home and play college summer ball. So whatever your situation, we've already dealt with it. So we can definitely help you guys improve. Excited to work with. We got Luke Burrows back from Clark State this summer training. We got Hayden Himes from Clark State as well coming in to train. Excited for him. He came in at 84, lefty that already knows how to pitch, has great off-speed pitches, great feel on the mound. So excited to get his velocity up to make him more, recruitable at the higher levels. So really cool stuff. So I'm excited to work with those guys. So yeah, hit us up for summer program, whether it's pitching, hitting, fielding, whatever you guys need, come check us out this summer.
So next on the summer thing is this year you've got summer Top Velocity, right? Where you're going to work with teams in the summertime, which as a team out there, I mean, if you want to work with summer, with Juan all summer and get your whole team in here, there's a good rate to do so. But I know you have 10 teams that are committed to do that. I'm really excited about that. Personally, I know a lot of our P413 teams are doing it. So very excited about that. So tell us a little bit about Summer Team Top V and how that's structured and what you're excited about there.
Yeah, Summer Team Top V, I mean, it's very similar to, the summer development program in the sense that you're getting those in-season reps that you're probably not going to be doing on your own, right? I think one of the things, especially with the college guys that are, coming back now, a lot of those guys that have trained with us in the summer in the past, when they go to college, they know what to expect. They know how to be able to maintain their bodies in season. If you've never been exposed to that, and if you don't know how to do that, then what we do here with a lot of our guys that come train with us is they know what they should be doing, whether it's in season, off season, how to properly assess where their body is and how to properly decide, okay, what kind of lift should I be doing today? Yeah, I'm sore. I just played Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Cool. I'll see you on Tuesday. And we got to get back into lifting and training, if that makes sense. One of the best things about, the summer team training is, it sucks to train on your own. It's not fun. So when you come train, with your teammates and your buddies, that's always going to help. Building that culture with guys, knowing that they're not only there training for themselves, but they're also showing up to a team practice. I think makes a really big difference, especially when their bodies are pretty beat up from traveling and playing and stuff like that. So I think that helps a lot. And whether they like to admit it or not, it helps them all as a team become better and better prepared for the following weekend. But I think a lot of guys, you think about it, like you're spending and investing so much time and money to get recruited in the summer. You're trying to show, a complete product. You're trying to show a product that's refined, a product that, that looks good, that can be, you know, sold to a college team. You know what I mean? You're looking for a scholarship when you're playing in the summer. So if you're not prepared physically to be able to show what you can show or show what you showed, in February, right? When those college coaches come out, they don't really care what you have been doing or not. They just care about, okay, where's your velocity at, and how did you pitch? How did you hold yourself accountable, whether you pitch good or bad? Kind of like with things that we teach our guys. Not don't hang your heads, pick up your teammates, especially on days that you didn't pitch well, um, or play well. But I think a lot of guys, during the season, that's really what the summer program, excuse me, that's really what the um, team summer top velocity is all about. We're going to have basically, it's going to go usually about 90 minutes. You're going to have half of that time to lift and train. And then the other half we're doing on our med ball work, doing our arm care program. And this will probably be the first year we make everybody go through the arm care test as well each week, which I'm really excited about. So we'll probably have to buy another one of those
Yeah.
because we gotta we just have one right now. The summer program, some of what we've been doing with our Sunday guys, we test their arm care each week. That way we could track how they're doing, track their progress, and if they're going down or if they're going up, they can see it immediately. And it's really helping with guys resonate. Oh, I feel good. Oh, dude,
Yeah.
are you sure?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think the arm care app, using that arm care app has been hugely beneficial to our kids, and I'm excited to keep exposing our guys to that, especially when it goes to the summer. Um, and then I think that's one of the biggest things that I think a lot of guys should take a little bit more advantage of. Especially if they're like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel. 2 days before the game, like, cool. A lot of guys are doing the test, but like the app gives you training that you can be doing, and it's for free too. There is a paid version, but the free version gives you training based on your deficiencies. So that's one of the things that a lot of the things that we know as athletes that we should be doing, you're not going to do, which is why you need to have that team environment and that coach and that person that's going to kind of walk you through it. Because at the end of the day, these guys are teenagers, 15, 16, 17-year-olds that they need to be taught how to do stuff. And then as the season goes on, it pretty much it streamlines itself, if that makes sense. So teaching these guys how to have that routine, and how to make sure that weightlifting is a part of their routine more than anything, I think is huge. But I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure that these guys that trained with us in the off season, when they show up to Lake Point or Grand Park, that they're really close to where the velocity at, if not better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess next would be, so in the past, I guess 5, 6, 7 years, you've coached in the summer.
Yeah.
You've coached with our 17U team usually.
Yep.
Most of the time, whatever team I was coaching, we would be together.
Yep.
But as the program has grown, you made the decision that you didn't feel that was right for our program,
Yeah.
for the reason that you need to be able to be here and be available to all of our guys,
That's
not
right.
just one team, right? So tell us a little bit about where your head is with that and how you're going to manage that. I mean, obviously you got Team Top V, so you're going to see a lot of guys this summer on Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget the days and times, but
Yep.
so how do you manage the Thursday through Sunday with now trying to take on all 10 high school teams?
I think one of the biggest thing is having a better open line of communication with our other pitching coaches. So whoever is designated as a pitching coach on, each team is if I can kind of manage and help those guys improve, now I have that time available. So like if I have, a coach on a 15U team or on a 17U team, now I can kind of coordinate and talk to them, like, because I've worked with all these athletes in the summer, and maybe these guys have never worked with these guys before, so now I can help manage that a whole lot better and a lot quicker. Also too, phone call away, you know what I mean, if I'm not there in person. But having that understanding that, I'm available as a pitching coach now for all the teams and not just one team. So like if let's say, I'll give an example, Whitaker's struggling, had a bad weekend the week before. Hey, maybe I'll set up my schedule this upcoming week to go see him and talk to him, see how he's doing his pregame work, see how he's setting up, where his mindset is, and then I can go to another field and go to another game. That way I'm not, stuck there, and help out other teams as well. But I think thinking of it from a more managerial role where I'm helping um, give tools to the other coaches that have not worked with a lot of these guys and maybe don't know what, pushes these guys better than others, or, pitch calling too is another thing. If I know this kid's out pitch is this one, or he's not using this pitch, like I'm going to know that. You know what I mean? But some of these coaches, especially early on in the season, they might not know that. So I think those hurdles from, when you think about, what is it, 10 high school teams?
Yep.
When you think about 10 high school teams, giving, each team, trying to find staff for summer teams in high school ball is extremely difficult. I think we all know that. So the best thing that we can do is educate our coaches as much as we can with the players that we all already know, because we've worked with them for 8-9 months. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And obviously you're coaching a specific team, multiple specific teams in the summer, right? Who's going to know hitters more than you or you?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're not in that dugout with that certain team because you guys are head coaching another team, it's really simple for them. You guys already do it now where, somebody will call you, hey, what's he doing mechanically? Hey, watch this video. So a lot of that stuff, that's kind of what I want to bring to the table now, is more of that. I want every kid in our program for P413 baseball to know that whatever pitching coach that they have a direct line of communication with me, and that we're going to help progress those guys to better work with each kid individually, because that's really what it takes. If you don't know how a kid reacts to certain things, or if you don't know if you need to hold a kid's hand more than another kid, that's really, I think, going to help us become a little bit more efficient with how we manage pitchers and stuff like that. And also too, being able to manage pitchers is a whole other thing too, right? Figuring out who's pitching when. Are we going to relieve them on Thursday so they can pitch on Sunday? Figuring out, hey, which college coach is going to see which kid on which day, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's more or less your wheelhouse.
100%.
How I want to ask you a question. So, how do you deal with that? With the structure of
So this year it's going to be a little different. So with the way recruiting is now, it's really the 17U level.
Well, yeah.
So for me, the hardest part this year is going to be I'm not managing the 17U team. Right. So when a college guy reaches out to me and says, hey, I want to see Drake Sauber or Brady Whitaker, or there's just an extra step now where I got to call Brian and say, okay, Skidmore's catching today. Oh, well, it's so-and-so's turn. I don't care.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or, hey, Drake needs to play center today, or right, or, they want to see Noah Bramble play short, not third, or third, not short. Well, Noah's our shortstop. I don't care. They want to see him play third. You know what I mean?
Right.
So now there's another line of communication where I got to go to Brian and say, hey, at this game at this time, so-and-so's playing this. You know what I mean? And that's stuff that I've never had to worry about in the past, because they would tell me directly, then I would tell our coaching staff, this is what we're doing. So now they're just having that extra step. Now, luckily, I've coached Brian since he was 14 years old.
Right. So
you know what I mean? So there's not going to be any issue with that. It's just different for me, in that regard, just because I've got to do a lot more while I'm coaching a 16U team. I still got to lead the recruiting for the 17U team. You know what I mean? So, and with me not always being there, it's just another step that I'm going to have to learn how to do. After this year, I won't have to worry about that anymore. I'll go back to 17 and I'll stay there for a long time.
Yeah.
But we wanted to be loyal to Brian. Brian asked to stay with this group because he's had them since they were 13, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe 12. I don't
He
remember.
was 12.
Yeah.
And the recruiting has changed a lot too. So back then you'd have to do that for all 4 ages.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's been a minute since we've had to do that. The last couple of years we haven't had to, because
Yeah.
they're basically recruiting the 17U age group. So.
Yep.
But it's why our 16U team is going to play the last 2 weekends of 17U. So right before they can call them on August 1st,
Right.
we're going to be playing 17 field teams where the college coaches are. So
Yeah, and the funny thing about that too is, I've seen it live. What was it? I think we were at the Reds RBI, and somebody wanted to see Josh Bevins steal a bag, and I'm like,
We've seen all kinds of crazy things.
That's my guy, Michael Jacob.
Yeah.
He's like, I'd like to see him run. Can you not courtesy run for him? I wouldn't mind seeing him steal a bag. So Josh got on with a hit or whatever it was, and I told him to steal on the first pitch, and Josh stole the bag. I looked at Jacob outside the fence. I said, "You good?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm good." And then we courtesy ran.
Courtesy.
Yeah, where's the letter of intent?
Obviously, it worked out. Josh ended up at Muskegon. But, kind of one of my funniest stories in recruiting over the
You
last.
see some crazy things like that. College coaches, because college coaches, they're coming in to watch a game. If I can put an athlete in an uncomfortable position, I want to see how they react to that. You know what I mean? Because college is going to be very uncomfortable for everybody. It's just part of growing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
A couple of the pitching topics that I wanted to get into before we run out of time was improving strike percentages with high school guys and pitchers. And there's a big talk about chunk angles right now. I think everybody talking about Paul Skeens, everybody's saying like he's got a lower slot right now than before. And, one of the things I wanted to talk about chunk angles or, arm slot. I think you hear this at the youth level a lot, or get your arm up. Get your arm up. You're throwing sidearm, or certain drills that in the past have taken over youth athletes nationwide. I want to educate the listeners and the parents and the coaches with when it comes to arm slots. I want the way that you should think about arm slots is your trunk angle. So trunk, torso, right? So your shoulder orientation. So basically, wherever my shoulder line is, right, that's that's going to be where my elbow is going to be, right? So if I lean over as I'm pitching, that's what dictates if I'm more over the top or more sidearm. I think a lot of times we'll hear a coach tell an athlete, "Hey, get your arm on top," but then you see the arm movement come up, right? But really, what should be happening is your torso should be leaning over your glove side, and that's what gets your arm to come up, right? And then obviously too, a lot of some guys can be a little bit more over the top like this. Some guys can be a little bit more to extension. But I think what you have to realize is watch some guys, whether it's an infielder, outfielder, or pitcher, watch them throw. Everybody goes into extension when they throw a baseball. So basically, wherever your shoulder line is or wherever your torso angle is, that's going to be your slot, if that makes sense. So I always hear, especially in pitching lessons, I'll have a kid tell me, "I want to throw a 12-6 curveball." I'm like, "You can't."
Right.
You're throwing right here. You know what I mean? So you can't teach that pitch. So your slot and your torso angle dictates what pitches best, coincide with the way that you throw. I'm not a big fan of, switching slots as well, because it's going to hurt a little bit of your consistency. But if you're a guy that has a really good feel for the zone, sure, you can play around with it to mess hitters' timing. Because at the end of the day, right, it's all about messing up the hitter's timing and not making them feel comfortable in the box. But I want, especially parents at the youth level and coaches, is like when you tell an athlete, to get on top of the ball, right, you got to show them like, hey, you need to be turning over your glove side to get on top of the ball. It's not necessarily bring the arm up top.
Yeah.
Also, too, you hear about guys teaching curveballs. I'm happy we don't teach curveballs until 8th grade. But at the younger ages, they're telling guys to get on top of the curveball, and you start seeing that elbow hike up, and you start having a lot of shoulder issues because of that.
Cut the ball hard.
Yeah, and once you get up here, now you're not in your lat anymore. You're not in your scap. So like now your shoulder's just kind of dangling right there. So I think when you see a lot of pitchers talking about arm slots, a lot of that's based on your trunk angle as well. I always think about Linscomb. I always tell people, like, do you think? Well, obviously some of the young guys don't even know who Tim Linscomb is now. Like,
Go.
so anyways, if those that know who that is, I would ask them, hey, do you think Tim Lincecum's a sidearm guy? And they're like, no, he's like way over the top. I'm like, well, look at him. If I take a picture of him like this, and then I change the picture this way, everybody's basically here, if that makes sense. And then it's just your trunk angle that's moving it around, if that makes sense. So I always wanted to explain that if the listeners are interested in. The other thing I wanted to talk about was improving strike percentages. I wanted to open that discussion with you guys. Like, what are some of the things that you guys do from the head coaching side, from the hitting side, to help improve, some strike percentages of some of your guys that you guys have coached in the past?
Well, I mean, as far as pitchers go, at Dayton Christian, I'm blessed with Keith Straffenberger, who is a very old school coach who, if you're not at 65%, he doesn't want you to ever pitch.
Mhm.
And so, just I think it's catch play, eyes to target is something that I think a lot of pitchers that I see now have struggle with. Like as they're going through their motion, their head's yanking because they're trying to throw so hard, and I think it makes it really hard to be consistent if I'm not looking at my target, right? You know what I mean? One of the things we do when we play catch is we tell our guys to pick a spot on the shirt, right? So I'm not trying to hit you in the chest, so to speak. I'm trying to hit the second O in good. You know what I mean? And I'm going to aim for that spot every time. And I think the more you play catch and with a focus, the more you're going to hit it. You know what I mean? If you just play catch just to play catch, you're not getting better. You know what I mean? And so we've talked about that a lot. That's so for me, it's all a lot of it's catch play, right? And some guys they just can't pitch. I mean, you know what I mean in my eyes, because if you can't play catch, like you can't play this game.
Yeah, I think a big thing with me, and this is kind of how I did. I'm a hitting coach now, but I used to be a pitching coach.
Yeah.
Being consistent is the biggest thing that you need to focus on, in my opinion. So, short box, we take that serious. The throwing progression throughout the week, what percentages we're throwing at in our bullpens, trying to make sure that we can try to stay as comfortable as long as possible, try to stay as consistent as we can on the mound, and that's what's going to help us throw more strikes. I mean, a lot of times when you see a guy not having a good day, what's the mechanical breakdown? How do they look? Are they flying open? Are they doing certain things, right? So, I mean, really it's just trying to, like I said earlier with muscle memory about hitting every day, it's kind of almost the same thing when you're going through your progression. How consistent are you in your progression? Are you creating a muscle memory there?
Yeah.
So, it's really just, it depends on what you really want to do. I mean, I know guys that do
I think the other thing-
65-foot bullpens, which is,
Yeah, the other thing we do is we measure it, right? They know a number. I'm like all the guys at DC know what percentage they need to throw. You know what I mean? Like they know what they're focused for. And afterward, Chris Hodge got his first start last week. He came off, and the only question he asked me afterwards was, "What was my strike percentage?"
That's cool.
Right? If you measure it, then it's going to matter.
Yeah.
Right? If you're measuring it, and then it's going to be important to them. If they don't know what you're trying to focus on,
For sure.
right? You know what I mean? Now, to a point where it's probably affected some guys in a negative place the last couple of years, right? Because when they're 54%, 56%, they feel like nothing they can do is right. Right? And then they start struggling, then they start throwing 6 miles an hour slower because they're trying to throw a strike, and then they're not effective anymore. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a balance.
Yeah, because I think the focus definitely has to be there. You know what I mean? So I think that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, the velo's cool, but if you can't get anybody out, it doesn't matter.
For sure.
right. Can I ask a question about that stuff? Like, have you in your career ever had an off period where you just didn't feel
For sure.
okay? And then how did you like resurface or find yourself again?
Well, I was always a walk 2, strikeout 3 guy for the longest time. I was not a very high percentage strike thrower. I'd get with 2 outs, walk 2, and then strike out another guy just to make the game interesting, But I mean, it was very frustrating. But I think I definitely, and I also ran into the yips when I was in college too. I think a lot of that was mental. My sophomore year, we had a really good pitching coach that I built a really good relationship with up there. So I went 6-1 my sophomore year as a starter at UNOH, and but I was also game 4 starter.
Yeah.
That matters. I didn't know how much it matters. That matters, when you're not facing the ace on the other team. Game 1, it's different. So flip it, go to year 3. I'm the ace at UNOH, the number 1 guy, and I don't have my pitching coach. He decided it was more important to get married, I guess, than being a pitching coach. But no, Coach Best, he went to Ohio State. He was awesome. So not having him that 3rd year, that really hurt. I didn't know how much it was going to hurt because I was throwing my hardest. I was a lot more, mentally mature. But the moment, my first outing, I remember we went to Lee University. Dude, it was 7 scouts out there because Lee had a bunch of big guys, and I was, popping up on some names, and I just made that game way too big. I walked 5, almost didn't make it out of the first, settled down for inning 2 or 3, and that was a mess. And that not having that pitching coach and not having that that help really put me in a bad place mentally for the rest of the season. So I ended up going 1-6 that year, and it still kind of lingered on through my senior year. And honestly, having that bad of a senior year is ultimately what gave me, I think the mental strength and the want to keep playing this game at a higher level, because I was like, I had put so much time into baseball, and I think a lot of us have, whether you're a player or coach, so you don't want to go out that way.
No.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that gave me a ton of, want and desire. And that's when I started taking baseball like a lot more serious than I ever did, even in college, because it wasn't, there was no scholarship anymore. It was basically on your own. All your training was on your own. It was money out of your pocket, time out of your pocket, instead of going to the workforce. But so yeah, I've struggled a lot. And if if you go look at my pitching stats at UNOH versus my pitching stats in indie ball, they're like two completely different pitchers. Obviously, Top V had a lot to do with that. But one of the things that I think I struggled with, at the early ages that I never really focused on was being afraid of forcing contact. I think, everybody wants to strike out guys. I think, you as a pitcher, if you want to throw more strikes, it's not about throwing strikes in terms of like the zone. I want athletes to think about throwing strikes as far as the hitter. Focus more on the hitter. And the reason why I say that is because of like the ways that you can get a strike, right? Obviously, you got the umpire strike zone, which that can change game to game, inning to inning, pitch to pitch, especially if you look at him the wrong way.
Correct.
But so we can't really focus so much on like the umpire strike zone, right? Or your strike zone, because you don't really know where the strike zone is, right? Because the umpire is different every time. But I think if we focus more on the hitter and trying to get that dude to swing more and try to get that guy to force contact on your terms more, then your strike percentage is going to go up. So like if I throw, a fastball right down the middle and it's 0-0, 0-1, 0-2, the result of that is going to be much better than being 2-0, 3-0. You know what I mean? 2-2 count, whatever. So I think if we can focus more on forcing contact, the better. And I resonate that with like in pitching lessons, even with the college guys, when I'm working on like arsenals and stuff like that, all these guys want all these wipeout pitches and all these strikeout pitches. I'm like, well, you already have a nasty breaker. You already have a really good slider or a really good changeup. Like, where's your bad off-speed pitch to get your hitters' timings off or just make them miss a barrel? You know what I mean? Like, we need more of those pitches, because a lot of the times it's not about, it's not about your out pitch. You already have an out pitch. Now it's about, okay, like, how do we set that up? You know what I mean? Can you set that up the right way? Can you get a guy to make contact on an account that they don't necessarily want to make contact in? I think that's more than half the battle, because if, when you're rolling and you go strike one, strike two, and then I was actually talking about this with, I forget who it was, but like they'll get to strike two and then they'll like throw a what's that called, like a waste pitch.
Yep.
So they'll throw a waste pitch. I'm like,
I hate waste pitches.
and I thought those were great. I'm like, in your brain it sounds like great, yeah, I'll set up the next guy, it'll clear his head. But no, like when you're actively trying to throw a ball, like that'll set you up bad mentally for the next
Like to
two.
create habitual issues.
For sure. And so I think if you keep attacking guys, especially as a pitcher, and the hitters are on their back foot, I mean, you're going to be more successful than not. And another way to think about it too is, let's say you do get beat. Cool, you got beat. You got beat in the zone with your best stuff, but you were ahead of the count. Then I feel like you could live with that. You know what I mean? Would you rather lose walking six?
Right.
You know what I mean? And obviously, like, we're not trying to walk guys, but I think if you focus more on, trying to get hitters to swing and trying to get forced contact, the better that's going to happen. And I think pitchers, especially POs, should try to throw more batting practice, and not like traditional, like how your coach would throw batting practice, but like on their short box days or in the lighter intent days, pull an L screen in front of you and just throw to hitters. You know what I mean? I think that is the most underutilized tool in all sports right now for pitchers. They're not facing enough hitters because we're saving arms. I get it. But there's still a lot of throwing that's happening during the week, and hitters need to hit. So obviously you guys can speak from the hitting side. I don't know, because I'm only thinking from the pitching side. So I don't know if this could be a bad thing for hitters.
Yeah, more you see, the better. But it's got to be real, right?
Yeah.
So if a pitcher's at 60%,
Yeah.
and he's throwing 74,
Would you move them up?
you would have to move the hitter up.
Okay.
You would have to figure out the distance and see
Yeah.
where they are on percentages. because
That makes sense.
It's got to be a real feel.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a little slower, then all you're doing is throwing the hitter's timing off,
Right.
and then they're going to start hip sliding and things to their front leg.
Yeah.
And
And those are the things that's what I was asking about. You want to be cautious of that too.
we're going to create bigger issues for the hitter because he's not seeing real.
Yeah.
He's better off walking over
Yeah.
12 feet from top D and
Yeah.
putting a machine on 87 and just getting his work in.
Well, I think that's one thing that we talk about reps, right? With pitching, we have short boxes, we have bullpens, and I just think it's super unutilized. If you have a guy that maybe is like your 7, 8, 9, 10 pitcher on your team, they haven't faced a hitter in 3 weeks. So how do you think he's going to perform? Some guys perform okay, you know what I mean? But again, trying to mimic that in-game feel or in-game practice, that's all we're trying to figure out as coaches. So I think if you have a more non-competitive practice, practice like that where guys are forcing contact. Hey, you're throwing batting practice, all your pitches in the zone, see how far they can hit it with an L screen in front. I feel like that's gonna, I think that's gonna help more than that. That's what I've been doing without really thinking about it, honestly, to a lot of hitters in the past few years. And then it just teaches you to, force contact in the zone. But yeah, developing the strikeout pitch is cool. You have 1 or 2 strikeout pitches, great. Let's figure out a curveball or a slider or a cutter that doesn't break as much, a little different than your fastball velocity, or maybe it's a 2-seam, whatever. So that way you're more more likely to miss in the zone and force that contact that'll better set up that other pitch. So when it comes to strike percentages, I think those are some big keys that I think are underutilized in the game.
I like that. One to waste here. I hate that.
Oh, it drives me crazy.
I remember we had when I was playing, we had like the best hitter in the league came out to bat, and it was like the week before playoffs, and our head coach was like, we are not pitching to this guy. I don't care what you guys do. You are not pitching to this guy. We're walking him every single time. This is what he said. You got to do what he says. He's a manager. So we go, I use the 3-hole. Strikeout, pop up, 3-hole. I got to walk him. And I'm like, I want to go right after him. You know what I mean? So I have to walk him. I mean, I'm like, I'd rather give up a bomb right now, right? But the manager's like, I need to get this guy. He's 20 for 28 in the past. We need to get this guy to not hit. So it's like facing Ohtani kind of deal, you know what I mean? Or Barry Bonds back in the day. Don't pitch to him. So I have to walk this guy. So I'm having to throw, fastballs like way outside. So I'm like having to overreach or whatever. I walk the next 3.
Yeah.
I walk the next 3 and I'm like, oh. So it's kind of like, it's tough. When you're like trying to throw balls on purpose, that's why I don't like those waste pitches sometimes.
Yeah,
So
I am not a fan of all waste pitches, right? 0-2, attack him, get him out. First contact now. We got to get a guy out in 3 or less.
Yeah, I'd rather you throw like a let it eat fastball or let it eat slider.
That's different, right? You want to throw a fastball 100? Cool, go do it.
Yeah, that's a great time. Right.
Try to throw it right down the middle. I don't care.
Exactly.
Attack the kid. You know what I mean? So I guess my last question will be very simply, what event are you the most excited for this summer?
I've never been to Grand Park.
Okay.
Never been to Grand Park. I'm excited to see what those facilities look like. I know we've had things. They played one summer out there, and I can't remember the last time our high school teams went out there.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, so I'd like to go see what that looks like out there and see what kind of competition they have out there. But no, thank you guys for having me on the pod. I know you guys are getting better at the pod because Kyle, I don't even remember you putting this on me. So that was incredible.
The studio mics back there.
Yeah, studio mics back there.
Now we're just working with handheld. No, actually, I'm actually pretty excited about Grand Park myself. I know MPL is such a big deal, and for you to be able to get invited to that, it's gonna be huge.
Well, Grand Park is Midwest, right? So I figured we're gonna get more Midwest teams, and a lot of our guys aren't trying to go to Cali or Florida. So I figured more Midwest teams would be nice.
Well, that's about all the time we have today. Juan, I just wanted to thank you for coming on. It's pretty good to kind of have a full circle getting into episode 36, coming all the way from episode 1 with you in the beginning. So it's really nice.
Sweet.
If you guys want to see more stuff like this, make sure you follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And to never miss a notification on our social media accounts, you can hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, boys.
Appreciate you, boys.
It's America's favorite pastime. Come on, let's have a good time. Slinging seeds. Yeah, we're just slinging seeds.